Hey church, welcome and thank you for worshiping with us. Wherever you're worshiping, in your home or on your TV, laptop or phone, you are a part of this family. And you could watch or listen to past messages by heading to mycornerstone.family. On our sermons page, you can view playlists, search for past messages, and more. You can even listen to our content by subscribing to the Cornerstone America's podcast, which can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. I hope you enjoy the message and thank you for being a part of the Cornerstone family.
All right, let's jump into the message this morning. We're continuing in our series on our imperfect family. Today we're talking about dealing with division. Division is just conflict. Division is just a part of life. It happens. And so we're going to deal with it this morning. And let me give you a few verses out of our text this morning to get an idea of what is going on here. You know, we've been talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Now we're finally getting to Joseph and his family. And it's as we're talking about Jacob and all his children and Joseph, it's still messed up. A lot of craziness going on. But look at this, Genesis 37, verses 12 and 13. Now his brothers, talking about Joseph's brothers, had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. In verse 18, but they saw him from a distance. So his brothers saw him in the distance, and therefore, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into these cisterns and say that ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Ever make you wonder, like, we read those verses right there, like, how did the family get here? How did the brothers get here? How did this kind of division end up in this family? And that's what this chapter is about, leading us into how this kind of division happened among this family. It gives us some keys not to do, and then we'll also talk about some things we need to do. But this is what we're dealing with today. And here's the thing, we see so much division in our culture. I think we live in a very divided society, not just in our families, but just almost along every segment, division. But just thinking about our families, just thinking about all the families that have been hurt through divorce and separation and the devastation that brings to everybody in the family. But even if we think about families that are together, that are still together in one house, there could still be division among them. And they may be living together and sleeping together under one roof, but they still may be just as divided as somebody who's gone through a divorce. And so how do we keep our lives and keep our families from walking in this kind of division? Because any way we slice it, division is destructive. Let's talk about some of the causes of division. We see that in this chapter. And the first one is showing favoritism. This is easy to see in the text. Going back to verse 1, it says, Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17. Now, we got to remember, he's 17. I think we get this idea in our head that he's a little boy going out to check on his older brothers. That's not the case. He's 17. In fact, I think in the text we get this idea that he has authority over his older brothers. So he's the youngest one. He's got one younger, Benjamin, but he is one of the youngest siblings, and yet he has authority over the older siblings. That's not going well. So we got to remember, he's 17. He should have some responsibility, but his dad has clearly favored him and given him authority over the other brothers, and they don't like that. So Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, and he brought their father a bad report about them. So again, he's working, I think, in this supervisory capacity over his brothers, and he had brought back a bad report. Of course, his brothers did not like that at all. But moving on to verse 3, he says, now Israel, notice here, now Israel, that's his dad, loved Joseph more than any of the other sons. He's clearly playing favorites because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. Now, when we think about this robe, again, we kind of go back to our Sunday school days. We think of this multicolored coat that he was given, and that's what we think. And we don't know much about this coat. We don't even know for sure that it was multicolored. What we do know, it has long sleeves. One of the things we do know, it has long sleeves. And I believe this coat gave him, it was almost like a coat of authority his father gave him, letting everybody know that he would be like the firstborn son. He would receive the inheritance. He would get all the blessing that comes with being the oldest, and that he had authority over the other sons. Now, he's the youngest. Now, if you know it, right, we understand there's an order to things, that when the youngest rules over the older ones, many times that doesn't go well, and that he's also this favored son that clearly Israel loves more than the other sons, and this is not going well at all. So he has this robe that identifies him, and I think this inheritance that he's going to get. Verse 4, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. That's how bad it got, was that they couldn't even speak a kind word to him. And so this is the problem here. We have division in the home, and one of the reasons is favoritism. He's playing favorites. Now, favoritism always fractures families. And I think we know this instinctively, that we shouldn't play favorites among our children. We need to love them all the same. This becomes a dangerous mix when we're throwing this favoritism, then he's been given authority over them. It becomes very dangerous. You throw in jealousy. Now this whole thing's being fueled by jealousy, which is turning into resentment. And this whole thing's going downhill. The principle here is, what we need to remember out here is, where there is favoritism, there's always friction. Man, if we're going to play favorites in our families, we're going to play favorites at work, we're going to play favorites around, there's always going to be friction because of that favoritism. In fact, James chapter 2, and there's a text here in James chapter 2 where he's talking about in the church they were playing favorites, and he talks to them about not playing favorites. He says, if you show favoritism, you sin and you are convicted by the law as a law breaker. So even James was dealing in the early church where they were playing favorites. Now, here's the thing. If we want peace in our homes, if we want peace in our closest relationships, then we need to love people equally, value them individually, because loving them equally doesn't mean we value them the same. We value them individually for who they are, and then we avoid the traps of comparison. We never want to compare people. We're all gifted differently, and we excel in different ways and in different areas, and we all have value. So we need to make sure we approach our relationships in that light. A second issue they had here was pride causes division. And look at verse 5 here. It says, Joseph had a dream. And here's where it goes from bad to worse. And when he told his brothers this dream, that they hated him all the more. And he said to them, listen to this dream I had. He said, we were binding sheaves of grain in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose up, stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. And his brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. So it gets even worse. And we don't know for sure, and I'm reading into the text a little bit. Was Joseph prideful when he shared this? I don't know. The text doesn't outrightly say that he was. His brothers obviously, I think, caught that whiff from him, whether he meant it or not. But sometimes we need to know when it's a good idea to share a dream and when it's not a good idea to share a dream. There's some people it's good to share a dream with. There's other people it's not good to share a dream with, right? They want to kill your dream. So maybe there was a sense of pride here. I think his siblings thought there was. And if we keep reading this, he had another dream. It says in verse 9, he had another dream and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream. If the first one didn't go good, I'm not sure why he went with the second one. And this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father, now even his father's getting upset with him, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you've had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? Even his dad's getting a little offended here at this. And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Pride, arrogance causes division. Again, we don't know for sure where Joseph's heart was at. Maybe he was prideful in sharing this. Maybe he wasn't. His brothers had that kind of, I think, perspective of it being prideful. But I think they were already skewed because they were already jealous because he was the favorite one, had this coat, had authority over them. But pride causes division. Pride always pushes people apart. Humility always draws people together. If we want our families to grow closer together, if we talk, as the way we relate to them, if it's in a humble spirit, in a humble way, we're going to draw people together. If it's in a prideful way, we're going to push people apart. We even get this sense when we listen to a speaker, there's a way that speakers can talk that is prideful, and it kind of pushes us away and kind of distances us. And there's other ones that, man, they speak with humility and they just draw us in. There's a pastor that came to one of our H&I events years ago, and he had a decent-sized church and lots of campuses, and the way he opened his message was he told is Stacy in here? He told a poop story. Let's say it. He told about an incident in his life that was embarrassing for him and having to go to the bathroom. And I thought, now there's a guy I can relate to. Because we all have stories, right? We could get around the dinner table and we could share some of our worst, most embarrassing stories. And it's humbling, it's embarrassing, but you're like, man, this guy's a real guy. I mean, he's just a normal guy, but he has those kind of problems too. Just as a way of reminder, small bathrooms on this side, large bathrooms down the hall, in case you need that this morning. But the point here remains, pride pushes people away, but humility draws people in. What they didn't realize, what his brothers didn't realize, that what was going to happen to Joseph was not for his elevation, but it was really for everybody's preservation. It was going to save their lives. That's the truth of what was actually happening. And Proverbs 16:18 said, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride causes division. If we're dealing with our closest people in prideful ways, it's going to cause problems. Number 3, hostility and rejection cause division. And this story it keeps building upon itself. You can see the tension just continue to build as we go through these verses. Verse 18, but they saw him in the distance. So now we're back to this point where they're out in the field. All his brothers are watching the flocks, and Joseph has been sent out there by his dad. And before he gets there, notice his brothers saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of this dreamer. Hostility and rejection. We feel the tension rising. It got to the point where all they needed was an opportunity, and the opportunity here arose for them to take action. Here's the thing, unresolved hatred, unresolved hostility leads to unthinkable actions. When we allow our anger to go unchecked, we allowed it to grow into hostility and resentment and bitterness, and we keep meditating on that, we keep thinking on that and allowing it to fester. Eventually it comes to this, that we do things that we would not normally do. Now we think of killing somebody as being very extreme, but we all do it. Have you ever said something you wish you wouldn't have said? Yeah. We tend to go through life dealing with issues, kind of sweeping them under the rugs. And then when something little happens, we blow up because it's not really about that one little thing. It's about all the things we've been holding on to that has been building up over time. We've all done it. We've all said things we wish we could take back. Rejection, abuse don't just happen overnight. They result from anger left unchecked. For them, it got to the point where they killed their brother. But John, the Apostle John said it like this in 1 John 3:15, anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. John puts this up pretty high that he says, man, if we just hate somebody, that's not right for us as followers of Jesus. I mean, we can't let things like this go unchecked in our heart. A fourth issue that they had here was deception and lying caused division. Deception and lying we see in Genesis 37, verse 31. Then they got Joseph's robe. Talking about his brothers. They slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornamented robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe, as if they didn't know it was Joseph's. Verse 33, he recognized it and said, it is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. They presented the false story. They had the coat. They had this evidence, this fake evidence that led Israel right to an account he could think of what had happened. Maybe the brothers didn't even have to say it, that he came up with it all his own. They presented this false story. Here's the thing, is that truth builds bridges, but deception and lies burns them down. Man, truth builds bridges. We need these bridges in our relationships. And by lying, by deception, we tear these bridges down. Here's the thing, relationships require trust. And in order to have trust, you've got to have truth. If you don't have truth, you don't have any trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have much of a relationship there. That's why telling the truth is so important in our closest relationships. That's why, man, I hate lying. I don't know, but I hate lying. Let's be honest, because if we have honesty, then we have something to build upon. We can build the bridge, but if we don't have it, we have nothing. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25 says this, therefore, each of you must put off falsehood, put off lying, and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members in one body. Even small lies grow into separation. Even small lies can grow and break down strong bridges. Trust is broken in a moment, and it takes time to build up. I think here's one of the things we need to always remember about trust. Trust is built slowly over time. It's not built instantly, but it's broken instantly. And my favorite example is that if your son or daughter is old enough to drive and you give them keys to your car and they go out and they've built up that trust over the years, you trust them with your car, and then they go out there and they do something stupid, they break that trust instantaneously. Now, you can forgive them, and forgive them is also pretty instant, pretty quick. You can forgive them for what they do, but do you trust them again with your keys in your car? No, not until that's built up, and that takes time. So that trust can be broken instantly, but that trust takes time to build. It has to be proven out. And that's why trust is so important in our closest relationships, because we can break it and wreck it in a second. And then it takes time, lots of time for it to be built back up. That's why I think we have to guard trust. We have to guard the truth. They're so important to our closest relationships. And we see that just being so destructive here in the story. Genesis 37, verse 34 says, then Jacob tore his clothes and put on sackcloth. I mean, he is mourning. He has been wrecked by this. And mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and daughters came to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. No, he said, in mourning I will go down to the grave to my son. So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph, and if you know the rest of the story, they sold Joseph to Egypt, to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, and it sets it up for how God is going to use him to save everyone's life. Little did they know that God was going to use that for that purpose. But here's the thing, we have such huge division in these lives, and yet even in America, in our culture, we see a ton of division around us, and at times we experience hurtful division in our homes. What do? How do we have harmony in our closest relationships? How do we have harmony in our homes? Well, for the remaining time that we have together, I'm going to jump into 1 Peter chapter 3 and talk about that. And it says here in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, he says, finally, all of you be like-minded. Be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate, be humble. He says, be like-minded, meaning live in harmony. He goes, you guys should live in harmony. He's given us a command to do this. He's telling you this can be done, and this is what we should do. He said, finally, all of you be like-minded, or all of you live in harmony. We could translate it like that. It is doable. It's not easy. It's hard work. Just like being married for 69 years is not easy. They've had good times. They've had difficult times. The thing is, they've made it through the difficult times to stay together and continue on this journey and on this road. We can live in harmony with each other. But here's where it starts in verse 12. This becomes so important, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order in this text, but I think it'll serve us well this morning. He says here, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. Now, righteousness has to do with a standard. It has to do with God's standard. That God has called us to a life of righteousness. Through placing our faith and trust in Him, He has wrapped us in His cloth of righteousness, His robe of righteousness, and He wants us to live a life of righteousness. He's given us a standard by which to live. And when Stacy and I were over in Taiwan a couple weeks ago, and we were teaching a marriage conference over there, one of the things we said is you've got to determine what's going to be your standard for your marriage. What's going to be the standard for your relationship? What's going to be the standard for your family? And if I bring a standard and I have one set of standards and Stacy brings another standard, our standards don't line up very well. It breeds a lot of friction and a lot of problem. But if we're both going back to the same standard, if we're going back to God's word, trying to understand that, trying to apply that, it gives us a starting point. It gives us a foundation to start with. And we're on the same page. We're looking at the same pages. We're looking at the same book. She's not reading a book over here. I'm not reading a book over here. We have a standard. The question is, what is your standard for your life? We can go to the world and get all kinds of standards. The world will tell us what's a good standard to live by. But will we make God's standard the standard of our life? He says, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, meaning God is watching. Well, that's a good reason to pick this standard. God's watching. He's got us, his eyes on us. He sees it. And he says, hey, here's the standard we should live by. And his ears are attentive to the prayers. Man, when we make God's standard the standard for our life, man, God, I'm going to follow you with my life. I'm going to try to live my life out the best I know how by the power of your Spirit, by applying your word to it. God's ears are open to our prayers. It says, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now, I prefer the first part of that verse rather than the second part. Do we have God's standard? Have we made a commitment? Have I made a commitment? Has Stacy made a commitment? Are we raising our kids in a way that we're committed to this standard and we're going to live this out the best we know how? If you want to make it 69 years, this is the best way to start. You've got to make this your foundation. We've got to have the right standard. Because the world, trust me, the world is going to throw all kinds of different standards out there, and they're going to sell it like this is the one that's going to work for you. Look at 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. The Apostle John wrote it like this. He says, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in them. He says, for everything in the world, and now he's not talking about the world and the people, he's talking about the ways of the world that are contrary to God. He says, for everything in the world, and he gives us three things here: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life come not from the Father, but from the world. Now, the world will sell us that these are the three greatest standards for living, that these are the three greatest values that you could give your life to. And the first one really is pleasure. When we talk about the lust of the flesh, it's really talking about pleasure. We live in a pleasure-seeking society, and our culture sells us, you want to be happy in life, then just pursue pleasure. The problem is all pleasure from the world decreases in value the more you get it. That's why it takes more alcohol to get drunk after you've been drinking. It decreases in value. It's not lasting. It doesn't increase in value. It goes down in value. That's why we keep buying more and more things. We buy something thinking it's going to make us happy, and short-term happiness it brings, but then we get tired of it. And if you lived in Ohio, we would put those things in our basements, and we would go buy something else that would make us happy. Why do most Americans have a spending problem? Because we've bought into this value that we need something to make us happy. Other than God, other than the people around us. We need something, and so we seek pleasure. We're in the seeking pleasure society. We've become obsessed with this. A second one is possessions. We love to show off our possessions. This is the lust of the eyes. Man, it looked good, and Adam and Eve went through these three same temptations, and so did Jesus. He went through these three same temptations, and yet Jesus succeeded in them, and Adam and Eve fell to them. Possessions. We want things, and so we like to buy things. And that the world will sell us that if you just had more stuff, if you had this, if you had that, your life would be better, you'd be happy, everything would be good. You could make it 69 years then. Prestige, the last one is prestige, the pride of life, that if I just looked important, if I was important, if people thought I was important, my life would be better. And the world sends us these messages all the time. More often than they used to, because we have these cell phones, smartphones in our hands that are sending these messages to us, reinforcing these values almost constantly. Do we have the right standard? The second thing that helps us have harmony in our home instead of division is having the right attitude. We see this going back to verse 8. He says, finally, all of you be like-minded. He said, be sympathetic. be sympathetic. He's talking about your attitude, sympathy, loving one another. He's talking about being compassionate, being humble. Do we have the right attitude? If we would just take these right here, sympathy, loving one another, compassion, and humility, and throw those together in our closest relationships, they would exceed in value. Our happiness level, our enjoying life, and with those that we're with, would go up. Are we sympathetic? Are we listening to understand what's going on with those around us? Do we love one another? This is, in the Greek, this is brotherly love. You know, are we trying to help them? Are we helping them like a brother? Do we love one another? Are we being compassionate? Meaning, are we doing something about it? Not just listening, but compassion is more than sympathy. It moves to do something to help that person. And then humility. Are we being humble? If we would deal with our closest relationships this way, there would be a lot less division and a lot more unity and harmony. Let's go to number 3, the right response. Verse 9, he says, do not pay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing. Because of this, you were called so that you may inherit a blessing. He says the right response. Do we respond the right way? When things are difficult, when life is challenging, when that person is, kind of annoying you, do we respond the right way? Do we react or do we proact? This happens a lot. Do we repay evil with evil, insult for insult? Man, if they get mad at me, I'm going to get mad back. If they're going to insult me, I'm going to insult them back. Is this the way we live? Is this the way Jesus called us to live? He said, on the contrary, repay evil with blessing. When's the last time you killed somebody with kindness, if I could use those terms? When's the last time that somebody who got under your skin and bothered you, you killed them with kindness? Repay evil with blessing. Because of this, you were called so that you might inherit a blessing. Man, when we refuse to repay evil with evil and we in turn give blessing, he says we inherit a blessing. It is good for us. Do we have right responses? Are we able to forgive? Are we dealing with the people around us like this? Right responses. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 5 says it like this. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Anybody got a list of wrongs with those people around you? No, we all have a tendency. This is human nature. One of the things I tell people, we sit down, we're talking about issues, and they're talking about, man, I'm doing this, or I'm feeling this, I'm frustrated this, and the first thing I'll say is like, that's normal. A lot of this is normal. It's just, it proves we're all human. It proves we need Jesus. We have a tendency to keep a record of wrongs. And we rehearse them in our minds. You guys are looking at me like deer in headlights. Like you can just talk to you, yeah, we know, right? And we rehearse them from time to time and think, man, if I ever have this conversation, this is what I say. And I would throw this zinger out like that, and that would get them. We keep this record. And sometimes we do that. We finally get into that argument, and now's the time I can use my record of wrongs, right? And this is not getting, some people say, my spouse gets hysterical on me. Well, somehow spouses get historical, and they just go back in time giving you that list of record of wrongs, right? She goes back in history. You remember 20 years ago? You remember 65 years ago when you said that to me? We keep a record of wrongs. It's human nature. We do it. But God has called us to live a different way where we don't keep a record of wrongs. He says love keeps no record of wrongs. That's hard to do. That requires forgiveness. That requires dealing with what we're feeling and not letting things build up. It requires intentional conversations. This is the hard work of our close relationships. This is the hard work that a lot of people don't do. You ever talk to somebody who's talking about something that happened 20 years ago, and yet they talk about it like it happened yesterday because they've never dealt with it? That's the way many people live. But God has called us to deal with it. All right, how about right words? This gets even harder. Verse 10, he says, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. Man, it means we can't let anything that comes into our mind come out our mouth. We've got to filter it. And you can still speak the truth, but you've got to filter that. Not every thought that comes into our mind is something we could do. Sometimes we have some very bad thoughts that we need to take, as Paul would write, take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Sometimes we've got to take those thoughts captive and deal with them in biblical ways. But he says here, whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. One of the ways you can gauge maturity of yourself is by listening to the words that you say. James, one of the most practical books in the New Testament, makes it very clear that our maturity can be measured by the words that we say. Now, I'm working on an AI app that what you do is it records the words you say all day long and then filters through and grades all the words they say and comes out with a maturity level for you. It's about to be released in about a month. Now, this is a great idea, though. I should do this now. And it will grade maturity. I'm just teasing about this, but if you take that idea, I want a cut of it. I'm just saying. But if we could take the words that we say all day long or all week long and filter it through and grade those words, we could come up with a way to judge how mature we are. Because the Bible talks about, James talks about, Peter's talking about it here, Jesus talked about it. That one of the ways we know how mature we are is based upon the words that we say. So now we're all thinking, what did I say this week? Ooh, I said that. Maturity can be measured by the words that we say. Are we using the right words with those that are closest to us, to those that we have conflict with, the ones that we're frustrated with? Proverbs 12:18 says this, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. How are we using our words? We can use our words to build people up. We can use our words to tear people down. How are we doing with that? Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, Paul said it like this. He says, don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful. Let everything you say be good and helpful so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. How would you characterize your speech? How would your spouse characterize your speech? How would your family characterize your speech? Would they say you speak words that build up? Or would they say you speak words that tear down? All right, let's go to the fourth one. Right actions. Right actions. He says here, they must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. Are we doing good? Are we seeking peace? Are we pursuing it? These words in the Greek have this idea of hunting, guys, right? I mean, you're out hunting. I mean, you are pursuing the duck or the deer or whatever. You are pursuing. You're waiting for it to get in line, and then you're going to take it down. These words, are we doing this with peace? Are we pursuing, are we seeking after peace? Or we just letting every fall wherever it falls? Whatever happens, happens. All right, let's stand up this morning. Let's get ready to close in prayer. Let's go to my last, or go the one just before this. Let's take this list of words here. You got one right before this? Yep. So think about this morning. What's your next step? What do you need to do? We all have work to do in this area. We're not perfect. Have you focused on, are you settled on the right standard? Maybe you need to go back and what is the standard? What does it say? How do we implement that into my life? How do we implement that into my family's life? The right standard. Am I living life with the right attitude? Am I loving towards those around me? Am I sympathetic? Do I have compassion? Right responses, are we careful? Right responses and right words, right actions. Are we careful about what we're saying, what we're doing? Are we really pursuing things that make peace? Peace doesn't just happen around our homes and in our families. We have to pursue it. We have to work hard at it. It takes effort. It's not easy. This is the hard work of relationships. But the benefits of doing this is worth it. Just in the short term, to live in harmony at home is so much better than going home to a place where you really don't want to be. It makes our home a shelter from the storms instead of being the center of the storm. It makes it a safe place for us, for our spouse, and for our kids. It's a safe place to grow them and see them grow into what God wants them to be. Here's the thing about it. The hardest place to live your Christian faith is not here at church. It's not in your small group. It's not here on Sunday morning. It's not when you're out with your friends. It's when you're at home and they see you at your worst moments and they see you at your best moments. That's where the true test of our faith is. How are we living this out at home? And that's what we need to dig down into. That's what we need to get honest with ourselves, honest with God, honest with those around us. How am I doing? And if I'm not doing well, then God, I need your help. And I may need the help of a few friends, and I may need some people to hold me accountable. And definitely for all of us, we're all working on this. This never stops, this never ends. You think you've got it put together, and then you blow it again. And then you go back to the table, back to the drawing board, back to Jesus, back to forgiveness, back to compassion, back to sympathy, and you make it work again. I wish it was a one and done. You know, you could kind of set this lever and fix and go the rest of your life, but it's daily picking it up. This is the hard work that God has called us to do.